Right before the wedding, I heard the man I loved whisper to someone else, "This is just a transaction. She's only the key to getting her father's company." He didn't just betray me. He turned my love into a tool, a means to his power, and I was nothing more than a walking contract. I stood there in the stunning wedding dress he chose. Outside, the music played. Hundreds of guests waited. Inside me was a pain with no name. But I didn't run. I didn't cry in a locked room like the heartbroken brides in movies. I walked out and shattered his perfect plan in front of the entire California finance elite. And when I took off that ring, I finally understood one thing. I'm not cheap enough to be bought. If you've ever loved deeply and been underestimated, stay. This story is for you. 10 minutes earlier, Evelyn Grace Harper had been completely happy. The sun poured through the tall windows of Harper Vineyard Estate, turning the air golden. The scent of roses and ripe grapes drifted around her, soft and sweet. Every detail had fallen perfectly into place: the music, the flowers, the lace of her dress. She had worked for months to make this day flawless. Lucas Mercer was waiting for her at the altar, the man who had made her believe in love again. His smile, his certainty, his promises, everything about him felt safe. For once, Evelyn allowed herself to stop analyzing, stop planning. She just wanted to be a woman in love. Naomi had teased her earlier that morning, saying, "You look terrified." Evelyn laughed. "I'm not. I'm ready." She believed every word. The vineyard shimmered outside, rows of vines glowing under the California sun. In her heart, she whispered the word forever. It felt heavy and beautiful on her tongue. If anyone had told her that in 10 minutes her forever would die, she would have smiled and said, "Impossible." This wedding was more than love. It was legacy. Harper Media and Mercer Capital, two powerful empires about to merge. Every major publication called it the wedding of the decade. Photographers filled the garden, and whispers of wealth floated through the air. But Evelyn didn't care about headlines. To her, it was simple. It was the day she would marry Lucas, the man who had stood beside her through sleepless nights, who promised, "You'll never be alone again." Charles Harper, her father, had walked through the hall earlier, pride softening his strict eyes. For him, this marriage meant unity, strength, the next chapter of the Harper name. For her, it meant peace. She believed love could be both beautiful and steady. She didn't know that steadiness was an illusion, that the calm she felt now was only the pause before the storm. The perfect day, the perfect man, the perfect lie, all waiting for the moment to break. Evelyn stood before the mirror, surrounded by white light. Her reflection looked flawless. The veil, the pearls, the soft curls framing her face. But behind the beauty, something felt distant. She studied the woman in the glass. Where was the sharp, fearless executive who once led boardrooms full of men? Where was the woman who had built her own career before Lucas came along? Now, she saw someone else. Someone delicate, painted, arranged. The bride of Lucas Mercer. The words echoed in her head, making her chest tighten. She reached for her necklace, steadying her breath. The diamond pendant felt colder than she remembered. Everything around her gleamed, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. For a fleeting second she thought, "Is this what love is? Or what surrender feels like?" Then she smiled at her own reflection, the kind of practiced smile a woman wears when she's not sure who she is anymore. The door opened softly. Naomi Fields stepped in, holding a small box of hairpins. She had been Evelyn's closest friend since college. Loyal, honest, impossible to fool. "You sure he's the one?" Naomi asked, adjusting the lace near Evelyn's shoulder. Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were searching. Evelyn laughed, shaking her head. "You worry too much. He's my safe place." Naomi's smile was small. "I hope so." They stood in silence for a moment. The air hummed with the faint sound of violins. Outside, the guests were taking their seats, sunlight spilling across the vines. Naomi squeezed her hand. You deserve every bit of this happiness." Evelyn nodded. "I finally feel like everything in my life is where it should be." She didn't know those words would haunt her later, when she learned that even the safest place can be a cage built by someone else. The door opened again, and Margaret Mercer stepped in. Her posture was perfect, her smile carefully arranged. "Everything must be perfect today," she said, her voice smooth and cool. Evelyn straightened. "It will be. The team has checked every detail." Margaret nodded once, eyes scanning the room like an inspector. "Good. The press is everywhere. This wedding represents more than love. It represents legacy." Evelyn managed a polite smile, but her stomach tightened. Something about the woman's words felt too precise, too rehearsed. Margaret's gaze lingered on the diamond ring, then met Evelyn's eyes. "You'll make a beautiful addition to the Mercer family." The words were kind on the surface, but the tone carried weight. Evelyn heard the subtext clearly. This was a merger, not a marriage. Behind the pleasantries was calculation. When Margaret left, the air felt heavier. Evelyn took a slow breath and whispered, "Perfect, right." But the echo of that single word sounded like pressure, not promise. Outside, the music swelled. Inside, her confidence began to crack. The room was quiet again. Naomi had gone, the bridesmaids too. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner filled the space. Evelyn stood still, hands clasped before her, feeling the weight of silence. Her pulse slowed. She could hear the faint music drifting from the courtyard. The sound of violins carried the shape of her future. Calm, ordered, expected. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Just a few minutes." Just a few minutes until everything began, until she became Mrs. Lucas Mercer. Her heart beat once, then again, too loud in the quiet. She tried to breathe evenly, but her chest felt tight. Something inside her, a voice, maybe instinct, whispered that the calm was wrong. She ignored it. The world outside was waiting. Inside, time seemed to hold its breath. She didn't know these were the final minutes of her peace. A faint sound broke the silence. At first, it was just a murmur, muffled by the thick wall. Then she recognized the voice, Lucas. She smiled unconsciously, moving closer. Maybe he was practicing his vows, she thought. The idea made her heart warm for a moment. Then the tone shifted. Low, intimate, not nervous, secretive. She leaned closer, pressing her ear to the cool plaster. "Everything is going exactly to plan, Camille." Evelyn froze. The warmth drained from her face. Camille? Who was Camille? She knew that name, vaguely, from somewhere in Lucas's work life. Her hands trembled as she tried to reason it out. A business call, maybe. A last-minute investor. But his voice was soft, tender, the way he spoke to her when no one else was around. Her chest tightened. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. She pressed her ear closer. Lucas's voice came through more clearly now. "This marriage is just a business move," he said. "Her father's shares will unlock everything." The words sliced through her like a knife. Her breath caught, her heart stuttered. He wasn't talking about a deal. He was talking about her. A tremor ran through her fingers. The bouquet slipped slightly in her grasp. The room tilted, and she gripped the table to steady herself. He continued, voice calm, confident. "She's perfect for this. Charles Harper trusts me completely." Each sentence fell heavy and deliberate. No emotion, no love, just strategy. Evelyn's throat burned. She wanted to stop listening, but she couldn't move. Every word chained her to that wall. Every word was another cut she didn't know how to stop. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "I love you, Camille. Only you, always." The world tilted again, sharper this time. Her knees weakened. The air around her turned thin. Those 3 words, the ones she had waited months to hear at the altar, were meant for someone else. Her hand went to the ring on her finger. It felt colder than ice, like it no longer belonged there. Tears didn't come. Her body was too stunned to cry. All she could hear was the echo of his voice through the wall, soft and certain. Only you, always. Each repetition hollowed her chest further. The music outside grew louder, blending with the ringing in her ears. The perfect day was collapsing quietly, beautifully, completely, just like the life she thought she had. Evelyn did not cry. She stood still, her body locked in place, her mind blank. The golden light from the window washed over her, but she felt nothing. It was as if her skin had turned to marble, her blood to glass. Half of her wanted to scream until her throat tore. The other half wanted to understand. Why? Why him? Why now? Why this way? The questions circled in her head with no answer. Her breath came shallow, slow. The room around her blurred at the edges, fading into silence. She tried to move, to take one step, but her body refused. The bouquet slipped from her hand, falling soundlessly onto the rug. She looked down at it. White petals scattered, fragile, broken. Somewhere, far beyond the walls, music still played. But in this room, time had stopped. The woman standing there was no longer the same. Something inside her had frozen forever. When she finally looked up, the mirror caught her eyes. The woman staring back was pale, unrecognizable. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide and empty. She took a step closer, studying the reflection as if it belonged to someone else. The glass gleamed under the light, then fractured slightly, her vision doubling, lines cutting through the image. The mirror wasn't broken, but it looked like it could shatter with one breath. She whispered, "Who was I loving all this time?" Her voice barely carried, swallowed by the still air. It wasn't anger that filled her. It was grief, not for him, but for the woman in the mirror, the one who had believed, who had built dreams out of promises. Evelyn lifted her hand toward the reflection, her fingers trembling. The cool glass met her skin. She didn't feel warmth, only the truth. She had been in love with an illusion. The door creaked open. Naomi stepped inside, smiling, until she saw Evelyn's face. The color drained from her own. "Eve? What happened?" Evelyn turned slowly, her eyes hollow. "He's on the phone," she whispered. "With her? Camille?" Naomi's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "He said, it's all a business move. He's using me, using my father." The words fell unevenly, breaking mid-sentence. Naomi froze, then exhaled sharply. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her expression changed. Quiet fury replacing shock. "We end him," she said. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "Not someday. Not after the honeymoon. Right now." Evelyn blinked. Something in Naomi's certainty reached her through the fog. The pain didn't fade, but it found direction. They weren't going to collapse. They were going to fight. "I need proof," Evelyn said. Her voice was still weak, but her mind had already shifted. Naomi nodded. "His phone, laptop, anything that connects him to her." She began pacing, eyes sharp, thinking fast. "He's arrogant. He won't hide it well." Evelyn steadied her breathing. The shaking in her hands slowly eased. "I can't just tell my father. He'll need evidence." Naomi stopped and looked at her. "Then we'll get it, right now." Her tone left no room for hesitation. "This isn't a wedding anymore. It's a takedown." For the first time since she heard his voice, Evelyn felt something other than pain. Purpose. She wiped her palms against the silk of her dress. 60 seconds, Naomi said. "We plan, we move." They spoke quickly, quietly. Two women in a room of white flowers rebuilding their strength in whispers. When Evelyn opened the door to the adjoining hall, her father was there. Charles Harper stood tall, calm, checking his watch like a man managing time itself. He looked up and smiled. "Ready, sweetheart?" Her throat tightened. She shook her head once. "The wedding is off," she said softly. His smile faded. "What happened?" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "Lucas isn't who we thought he was." In that instant, Charles's expression shifted. The warmth vanished, replaced by something cold and controlled. He didn't need the details. He knew. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Tell me everything." And she did, not with tears, but with clarity. As she spoke, his face darkened, his jaw set like stone. The father who had raised her with kindness was now the man preparing for war. The door opened sharply. Naomi slipped inside, breathless but smiling. "I got it," she whispered. In her hand was a small silver USB drive. Evelyn blinked. "What is that?" "His laptop was open," Naomi said. "There's software recording all his business calls. He forgot to turn it off." Her voice trembled with adrenaline. "Every word, Eve. I have it all." Evelyn stared at the small piece of metal resting in Naomi's palm. That tiny object carried everything. The truth, the betrayal, the weapon they needed. She reached out, closing Naomi's fingers around it again. "You just changed everything," she said quietly. Behind her, Charles stood silent, watching. He didn't ask how, he didn't need to. He simply nodded once. A signal. The music from the courtyard swelled again, faint but rising. It was time. Evelyn drew in a steady breath. Naomi pressed the drive into her hand. "Let's end this," she said. Evelyn met her father's eyes. No more tears, no more fear, only resolve. Charles adjusted his tie, his face calm and unreadable. He turned to his daughter. "We still have a walk to take." Evelyn nodded slowly. The same sentence had meant something different an hour ago. Then it was love. Now it was justice. She slipped her arm through his. The hallway beyond the door glowed with warm sunlight, blinding after the dimness inside. Her dress brushed softly against the floor as they stepped forward together. Charles glanced down at her. "You sure?" "Yes," she said. "I'm not walking to marry him. I'm walking to expose him." For the first time that day, a faint smile crossed his face, not of happiness, but pride. "Then walk tall," he said. Evelyn lifted her chin. Each step toward the garden felt deliberate, final. The music waiting outside sounded less like a love song and more like a drum before a verdict. The guests rose as the doors opened. Over 400 people turned to watch the bride. Their faces shone with joy, unaware that the story had already changed. Lucas stood beneath the floral arch, his smile wide, confident. To him, this was victory. Every glance, every camera flash was proof that his plan was working. Evelyn walked slowly, her hand on her father's arm, her expression calm, unreadable. The air around her seemed to still. Naomi stood among the bridesmaids, eyes locked with Evelyn's. A silent understanding passed between them. It was almost time. Lucas's gaze softened as she approached, mistaking her calm for awe. He had no idea. The crowd saw a radiant bride. Only Evelyn knew she was walking toward the end of the lie. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, scattering across Evelyn's veil. The string quartet played softly. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. She could feel her father's steady presence beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They both knew what waited ahead. Each step brought her closer to the altar, to the man who had destroyed her trust. Her pulse stayed even, her face serene. Inside, her anger burned in silence, clean and sharp. Lucas extended his hand when she reached him. She placed hers in his, cold against his warmth. He mistook it for nerves and smiled. She smiled back. It wasn't forgiveness, it was farewell. The officiant began to speak, words about love and forever filling the air like smoke. No one noticed the quiet storm gathering behind her eyes. The ceremony moved forward, line by line, verse by verse. Evelyn barely heard any of it. Her focus narrowed to the moment she knew was coming. Then it arrived. The officiant lifted his gaze. "If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage," he said, "speak now, or forever hold your peace." A hush fell. The wind paused. Someone coughed softly in the crowd. Evelyn stepped forward. Her hand rose slowly, steady as stone. "I have a reason," she said. Gasps rippled through the rows of guests. Naomi's lips curved faintly. Charles stood tall beside her. At the altar, Lucas's smile faltered for the first time. The fire had begun. "I have a reason," Evelyn said. Her voice carried across the courtyard, clear, unwavering. The murmurs stopped. Every head turned. "The man I was about to marry," she continued, "is already in love with someone else." A stunned silence swept through the crowd. Even the music seemed to hesitate mid-note. Lucas blinked, confused, his practiced smile slipping. Evelyn turned slightly, addressing not just him, but everyone. "For months, I believed this day meant love, but for Lucas Mercer, it was about something else." Gasps scattered through the guests, the sound of disbelief rippling outward. In the front row, Margaret Mercer stiffened, her fingers gripping her clutch. Evelyn's heartbeat steadied. For the first time that day, she felt control return. This wasn't chaos, it was clarity. The truth had finally found its voice, and it was hers. Evelyn's words came slow and deliberate, each one sharp enough to cut. "He called this wedding a business move," she said. He told another woman that marrying me was the key to my father's company." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Some gasped, others whispered. Phones appeared, screens glowing as guests recorded every second. Lucas's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Evelyn took a breath, her tone calm, almost cold. "He planned to merge our assets, secure control, and then leave, after a quiet divorce." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "The woman's name," she said finally, "is Camille Rhodes." The name hit the air like a stone in still water. Margaret's eyes widened. Naomi's hand brushed the edge of her clutch. Ready. The crowd's energy shifted from shock to fury. Lucas's perfect mask was breaking. Naomi stepped forward from the line of bridesmaids, silent but certain. She lifted her phone, already connected to a small portable speaker. Her voice cut through the noise. "Is this your voice, Lucas?" A click, then sound. Through the speakers came the low, unmistakable tone of Lucas Mercer. "I love you, Camille. It's all a business deal." The recording filled the courtyard. Intimate, damning, undeniable. Every guest heard it. Every whisper stopped. Evelyn watched him closely. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The voice continued, calm and confident. "She buys everything." A collective gasp broke through the crowd, followed by outrage. The air seemed to ignite with whispers and judgment. Naomi stopped the recording. Silence fell again. Heavier this time. The truth had become sound, and sound could not be erased. Lucas stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. Every trace of charm vanished. He looked like a man stripped of his armor. Margaret Mercer rose halfway from her seat, shock and humiliation fighting for control in her expression. Her son had not only betrayed love, he had shamed their name. Evelyn didn't look at her. Her gaze stayed fixed on Lucas. Then, Charles Harper rose slowly from the front row. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of power and finality. "As of this moment," he said, "Harper Media severs all ties with Mercer Capital, effective immediately." The words dropped like verdicts. No one dared speak. This was not just a broken wedding, it was a public execution. Lucas's mouth opened, but his father-in-law's authority silenced him before any excuse could form. The empire he had built on deceit began to crumble, right there, in front of everyone. Evelyn turned back toward Lucas. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She raised her left hand, the diamond catching the sunlight. "You thought this was the price for my love," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from control. "You were wrong." She twisted the ring once. It resisted, then slid free. For a moment, she held it in her palm, a cold, glittering symbol of everything he had faked. Then she let it fall. The diamond struck the stone floor with a sharp, final clink. The sound echoed through the courtyard, small but absolute. Every guest heard it. Even the birds went silent. Evelyn looked at Lucas one last time. "You'll never be rich enough to afford what you just lost." And with that, she turned away. No longer a bride, but a woman free from the lie. Evelyn turned. The courtyard was chaos. Phones lifted, guests crying, whispers spreading like fire. But she didn't rush. She walked. Step by step, down the same aisle she had entered minutes ago. Her veil drifted behind her like smoke. The crowd parted without a word. Some people stared, some wept, others filmed. She heard her name whispered in disbelief. But Evelyn kept her head high. She wasn't a runaway bride, she was leaving a battlefield. The air around her seemed clearer now. Every step away from him felt lighter. She no longer carried shame, only dignity. Naomi fell into step a few paces behind, silent support in motion. Charles followed, his eyes on his daughter, steady as a wall. Evelyn didn't look back, not once. The lie was behind her. The woman she had become was walking toward her truth. She didn't escape. She ascended. When the heavy oak door closed, the sound of the crowd disappeared. Evelyn stood still for a moment, trembling. Then the strength that had carried her through the ceremony began to fade. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons on her dress. The silk slipped to the floor, pooling like a white shadow at her feet. She stood there in silence, bare shoulders shaking. Tears came, slow at first, then all at once. Charles crossed the room and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did what most can't," he said quietly. "You stood tall." She turned to him, her voice cracked. "It doesn't feel like strength." "It never does at first," he replied. He pulled her close, careful, steady. The father who once taught her to fight with words was now teaching her how to survive with silence. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to break, safely. Naomi entered quietly, her heels soft against the rug. Evelyn looked up, eyes swollen, voice barely a whisper. "It's over." Naomi shook her head. "No, it's not. You ended him, not yourself." She knelt, helping Evelyn out of the last layer of lace. Then she looked straight into her friend's eyes. "He never deserved you," Naomi said. "Your love was real. His wasn't." The words landed like a balm. Evelyn let out a small, broken laugh that turned into a sob. Naomi didn't flinch. She pulled her into a hug, firm and grounding. They stayed like that, two women in a quiet room full of truth. No apologies, no explanations. Only presence. Naomi whispered, "One day, you'll see this as the moment you saved yourself." Evelyn closed her eyes. For the first time since the morning, she believed her. Morning light spilled across the vineyard. The air smelled of rain and grapes, clean and alive. Evelyn stood by the window, wrapped in a robe, hair loose, eyes tired, but calm. Outside, workers moved quietly among the vines. The estate looked untouched by yesterday's storm, as if nature had already moved on. She breathed deeply. The ache was still there, but it no longer ruled her. Her father was gone to meetings. Naomi was asleep in the next room. For the first time, Evelyn was truly alone. And it didn't scare her. She whispered to herself, "I lost nothing worth keeping." The words lingered in the air like sunlight. She touched the spot on her finger where the ring had been. Empty, but finally free. She smiled. Not the practiced smile of a bride, the quiet one of a woman who had survived. Evelyn Harper walked away not from a man but from a lie. She lost her wedding, her illusion, but found herself again. The story the world saw was scandal, but inside that story was rebirth. Because sometimes freedom doesn't come wrapped in celebration. It comes in the sound of footsteps leaving, in a breath finally released. Have you ever trusted someone who broke you? Have you ever stood in the ruins and realized you were still standing? Share your story below, because every scar tells a truth, and truth is how we heal. If Evelyn's story moved you, stay, subscribe, and join us for more real stories of strength, heart, and redemption. The music faded long ago, But for Evelyn, the song had just begun.